Tonight on Movie Cap, we're watching the 1988 brunch time masterwork, Beetle Breakfast. Beetle Orange was written by Michael McDowell, along with Larry Wilson and William Scarron. It was directed by then-unknown director Tim Burton and stars Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, Michael Keaton, and Winona Ryder. Tonight, I'm watching the Region A 20th Anniversary Deluxe Edition Blu-ray from 2008 with the lenticular slipcover. So yeehaw! I actually first saw Beetle Drink when it was in theaters. Am I dating myself by saying that? I have to confess that when I first saw it, I was mostly confused by it, but I have grown to really love it. For general audiences coming fresh to this movie, I'm giving it a B. And for its target audience of wacky comedy lovers and goths, it gets an A-. I'll explain more about why in a little bit. In the late 1980s, no one really knew who Tim Burton was. He had done one feature film, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and finished a number of short films that wouldn't be released to the public for many years. It wouldn't be until the release of Batman that he would become a star. Coming from an art and animation background, it was Burton's vision and art direction that elevated his work from obscurity. Given the times, it's amazing that he was able to turn a fringe art style into a major force in Hollywood. The stories that Burton almost always takes on are stories that have a strong element of alienation. His protagonists are characters that are outsiders and don't fit in, often to great comic effect. Much of his journey could be put down to luck and being in the right place at the right time, but a lot of it may have been Burton's ability to produce work that stayed relatively unwatered down through the gauntlet of Hollywood. And while there are a few examples of the coming Burton-esque aesthetic in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, it was really Beetle Fruit that touched off the powder. Beetlemire is a bizarre comedy with all kinds of strange and wonderful imagery. The story basically follows two drastically different families, the Maitlands and the Dietzes. It is a film that is very much about contrasts, contrasting families, contrasting cultures, and contrasting marriages. Differing ideals and thoughts about what is acceptable and what is wanted in life or afterlife. Even though the film is lighthearted and fun, the story is about the mayhem that is created when these families collide. And in the middle of it all is a young girl, Lydia. The film has a strong theme of marriage and married life. The Maitlands and the Dietzes have very different ideas about what marriage means. The film is not directly about divorce, but rather the consequences of divorce, as in the chaos that ensues when families go to war, and the effects on those caught in the middle, in this case, Lydia. From this child's perspective, it is very much about family life falling apart and her yearning for stability. But don't worry, it has a happy ending. The town in Beetlewater does not play a particularly significant role in the film, but the model of the town plays a huge role. It's the most important prop in the movie. Fittingly, the movie opens by introducing this model. The town is an idyllic, teeny-tiny town in Connecticut, and it's clear that the Maitlands idealized their life in small-town America. They idealized their model of the town even more. If the town wasn't perfect enough, the model of the town certainly is. After the model, we are then introduced to Adam and Barbara Maitland. They are an extra cheery and good-natured couple. They love each other, they love life, they love their town. Adam and Barbara have one problem, which is that they want children and have been unsuccessful in having any. But they don't let that get them down. They drive into town to collect some parts for the model. On the drive back, they almost hit a dog and then crash the car off the local covered bridge. Apparently, they die in the crash, but it takes a while for them to realize that they are dead. This is really where the movie starts to be fun and bizarre as the Maitlands learn about the world of the dead. Importantly, they learn that all their preconceived ideas about the afterlife are wrong. The Maitlands have become ghosts. They discover that there are many limitations on their existence as the deceased. For instance, they cannot leave their house. And if they do try to leave the house, they are transported to another dimension that is a vast desert infested with giant sandworms. Also, the living can't or won't see them. They find it all very frustrating, mostly because they do not understand the new rules. To make matters worse, a new family has purchased their house. Some time passes and Adam and Barbara are going a little stir-crazy from being stuck in the house. One day they are awakened by the calamity of the Dietzes family moving into the house. Charles and Delia Dietz are city slicker property developers that want to get away from the city in order to find some peace and quiet in a small town. Unfortunately, they bring all their craziness with them. They also bring Charles' young daughter, Lydia. The film never mentions what happened to Lydia's real mother, but given the subject of the film, I would guess that she has died. Not only are the Dietzes moving into the Maitlands' house, but they immediately begin to remodel it. This angers the Maitlands, and they try to scare the Dietzes away as ghosts. But it doesn't work since the living can't see the dead. Nevertheless, a battle between the two families has begun. At this point, the Maitlands find a flyer and see a TV commercial advertising Beetlejuice, a bioexorcist who says that he can get rid of the living. Suspiciously, this is exactly what they want, but they don't understand how to call him. Instead, they draw a door to the other world where they seek help from their caseworker, Juno. Juno explains a little bit more about how being dead works. She tells them that they themselves are responsible for removing the Dietzes from the house. She also warns the Maitlands against calling Beetlejuice and explains that he is dangerous. The Maitlands try again to scare the Dietzes and fail again. In frustration, they call on Beetle Sandwich and unleash the Agent of Chaos. Craziness results. Beetle Wedding Cake does scare the Dietzes, but they are more set than ever on trying to capitalize on these real ghosts. In an attempt to force the Maitlands to appear, the Dietzes perform a seance, and Adam and Barbara do appear, but then begin to age and disintegrate into dust. Lydia tries to help the Maitlands by promising to marry Beetle Crumpet, who then springs into action, causing all kinds of hilarity and mayhem and wrecking the house. The Maitlands finally defeat Beetle Lawnmower by bringing a giant sandworm crashing through the house to eat him. In the end, the Maitlands and the Dietzes agree to live together in the house in peace. Everyone wins in the end of the film, especially Lydia. Beetlejuice is not a film that drudges up the pain and horror of families dealing with divorce. I don't think that is what the writers had in mind when they were constructing the story. I think what they wanted to do was create a wacky supernatural comedy, and they were certainly successful in doing so. But the foundation of the movie is a scenario of two very different families doing battle. And at the heart of the film is a young girl who is alienated from her family and the world at large. The perfect Tim Burton protagonist. While the movie is named after Beetlejuice, that character actually has the least amount of screen time of any of the characters. The film mostly follows the Maitlands, but Lydia is really the core of the film. All the madness and havoc of the two families is swirling around her. The film has a strong marriage theme running through it, as well as a lot of marriage imagery. The Maitlands are depicted as living in nuptial bliss, while the Dietzes seem to be riding rough. There are many jokes about spouses and spousal roles. During the third act, when the Maitlands are rematerialized by the seance, they appear in their wedding garments. In order to save the Maitlands, Lydia must appease Beetlejuice by marrying him, and what follows marriage is the inevitable divorce. The conflict between the families could very much be seen as a metaphor for the battles between a divorcing couple and their associated kin. In this case, the primary couple would have been Charles Dietz and Barbara Maitland. These are the characters that instigate conflict and action in the movie. Adam and Delia are much more passive characters that are in the role of reacting to the conflict as it arises. It's Charles that buys the house, uproots and replants his family, and insists on staying in the house. It's Barbara that becomes enraged at her house being remodeled, calls Beetlejuice after being warned against it, and in the end, it's Barbara that brings the sandworm to get rid of Beetlejuice. Delia continually expresses her wish to give up on the house and return to the city. She is annoyed at her new husband and his daughter and spends time with her friend Otho instead of the family. While Adam is not totally passive, his character is continually trying to solve problems in a pragmatic and even-keeled way. Lydia is very much the fulcrum of the plot. She is mostly ignored by her father and stepmother. They seem eager to shoo her away rather than deal with her, and they openly mock her in front of guests. The opposite is true of the Maitlands. They work to gain her trust and sympathize with her situation. The audience's sympathies lie with Lydia. While she does not save the day in the end, it is Lydia that has the good heart and the willing to sacrifice herself to save the Maitlands. The Maitlands is the family that Lydia chooses as the child in the middle. The character of Lydia is clearly an evolution of the Allison Reynolds character from The Breakfast Club, which came out 3 years earlier. Allison is a much more serious character, and Lydia is verging on being a caricature of Allison. But all the characters in Beetlejuice are caricatures and stereotypes. Everyone is exaggerated for comic effect. The most extreme character is, of course, Beetlejuice himself. Beetlejuice is an instigator of anarchy. His motivation in the film is purely to cause trouble. As a spirit, he is continually trying to escape the confines of the other side. His scheme is to work as a bioexorcist, a kind of professional poltergeist, antagonizing the living. In this sense, Beetlejuice is very much a trickster god, such as Loki or a lower spirit like pixies and gremlins, causing trouble as a way of keeping mortal souls in check. But using Beetlejuice purely for the sake of comedy is not really what the character is all about. The filmmakers seem to introduce Beetlejuice as a much more interesting element. Because the movie is a comedy, the writers couldn't wallow in the tragedy and ruins of divorce. Instead, they divorced the mayhem from the conflict and externalized that element as the character of Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is the personification of the battle between the families. He terrorizes everyone in all directions and is at his most powerful when the two families are colliding. So I gave Beetle Movie a B for people coming to this film fresh, and I gave it an A- for its target audience. Beetle Kino is a wild and crazy ride. It's weird, it's strange, it's hilarious, and most of all, it's just plain fun. The movie suffers a bit from some low production value and weak special effects. Of course, for the fan in me, these elements only add to its charm. Stop-motion animation holds a special place in my heart, but modern audiences who haven't grown up with Beetle camera won't be impressed. Also, even though Tim Burton's style has become quite prevalent today, his imagery has become blander with each new project. Beetle film was really the proper launch of the Burton aesthetic and is much more in your face, something that modern audiences might not appreciate. But these are all pretty small grouses. Beetle celluloid was originally, and still is, intended for people that love wacky comedy and goths. Therefore, the movie gets an A-, as it definitely still holds up today. Thanks, Tim. The first thing to bring up about Beetle's striped suit is the art direction. This is where Tim Burton really shines, and it is the foundation of the concept that would later be called Burton-esque. Burton really knows how to create a celebration of the macabre. His designs incorporate symbols of death and spookiness, but are so fun and happy that a normal's perspective will be tilted. The cinematography and lighting in this movie are tricky. You get the sense that the film is being lit and photographed in a completely flat way, as you expect from a straightforward comedy. But then things get turned on their head. As the drama of the film ruptures, the lighting switches over to an expressionistic style with strong patterns of light and dark, and often vibrant colors. It's definitely a highlight of the movie. The genius Danny Elfman provides the music for the film. Elfman clearly tuned into Burton's expressionism as the score complements the visuals to a T, with all kinds of zany sounds and lollipop orchestrations. The score is also used quite effectively to increase the tension in dramatic scenes with an almost ticking time bomb feel. The cast is a mix of studied comedic actors, grounded dramatists, and fresh faces. The chemistry in the casting is dead on. Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis charm us as the bewildered Maitlands. Jeffrey Jones is great as the capitalist father, Charles, and Catherine O'Hara is simply a comedic masterpiece as the stepmother, Delia. Really, the only one of the cast that can keep with O'Hara is Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice. It's a shame there isn't more time with Keaton in this film because his performance is as bright as his character's namesake. Winona Ryder channels Lydia to perfection, but in retrospect we can see that her greatest performances were yet to come. With all these ingredients in the cauldron, Burton cast his spell to great effectiveness. When released, the film started off slowly and was not a huge hit. However, over time, Beetlejuice has become an iconic American comedy. Hey movie cats, I'm just a puppet, but there are real cats out there that need your help, really. Please take some time to locate the cat shelter that is nearest to you and make a donation. And if you're in need of some love, as we all are, you can adopt a cat from that shelter and improve your life, as well as the lives of our feline friends. This week, Movie Cat is highlighting this shelter. Thanks so much for your help.